Hello, it's Jorbs here, and I'm gonna make a TFT video here explaining the game to 5 different levels of players. We got beginner players, enthusiasts, advanced players, expert players, and master players. I would consider myself sort of approaching expert level of this game right now. It's only been out for a month, so the level of how good people are gonna get is still like way up there compared to where people are. It's a very, very complicated and difficult game. So I'm going to be like, when I'm talking about master level play, I'm going to be talking a little bit in theory just because I'm not good enough to do that yet, and I don't think anybody's quite there out of all the people in the world. Teamfight Tactics at a beginner level is it's a like team building game where you put together a bunch of different units from League of Legends and you have them fight. You don't control them during fights. They have an AI and they fight on their own. You're in a lobby with 7 other players. You can see my mouse cursor from the recording over here. And you can see my mouse cursor in the game looks a little bit different and is in the middle of the screen. So I'm this river sprite at 100 health. I'm making a team out of the piece that I got at the carousel here. And we've got 7 other players in the lobby. Everybody starts with 100 health. As you play through the game, you'll get paired up with creep rounds, like this one right here, where you're usually going to be able to beat a creep round with the team that you have. Shouldn't be too hard. And the creeps can drop you items and gold, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Or you get paired against players. If you get paired against players, you fight the other player's team, and usually one of you wins, one of you loses. The one who wins deals the other player damage. And as these health totals drop down from 100 towards 0, players get knocked out of the game. So in this game, it doesn't end at the same time for everybody. If you're knocked out in 8th place, you might be knocked out, 15 minutes before the end of the game actually happens. And then like the top 3 players could be playing for another 5 or 10 minutes when they're the only ones left. This is the first time that we interacted with gold in this game. Gold is a resource that we can use to buy pieces. We can use it to refresh the pieces that we see. Every turn we get to see 5 different cards down here. I bought all of them in this case. But if we want to see different ones, we can pay 2 gold to see a different set of 5 cards. We can use gold to buy experience as well. Experience is a resource which levels us up. Right now I'm level 2. I just hit level 3 from the 2 passive experience that you get every round. And experience just governs how many units we can have in the field, and also how expensive the units are that we see in these cards. If I was level 7 right now, I'd be seeing far fewer units that cost 1, and I'd be starting to see units that cost 4 and 5 pretty regularly. Units in this game cost between 1 and 5. Over on the left side of the screen, we can see a synergies bar. Different units have different types. Right now, Tristana and Lucian are both gunslingers, and so we have 2 gunslingers in. And that means that our gunslingers have a chance to make an additional attack against an extra enemy every time they auto-attack. So learning what the different synergies do and which pieces are which synergy is one of the things that takes a while as you're starting out in the game. Sort of the first day is learning all the different piece types and synergies and how they fit together. And also how to use the items. We've got 3 different component items here, and you can put 2 different components on the same character and build a combined item. So there end up being 8 different components, which gives you 32 different combined items in the game to think about. Once you combine items, you can never uncombine them. So one of the strategies in this game is thinking about, do I want to make this item or do I want to wait and combine these pieces into a different item that's more important to me? Also, once you put items on a unit, you can never take them off that unit. And so the exception is selling the unit. And so sometimes it will be like, I don't really want this unit to be the piece that has my item late game, but I'm planning to sell it, so it's okay to put an item on it now, and I'll just sell it and get the item back later. A beginner trick that you'll work out, you need to know sometime in your first or second day of playing probably, is say that we put this Negatron cloak on our Aatrox here, but we wanted to create a different item that didn't have a Negatron cloak in the piece. I'm just scouting on the board, sorry about that. What I could do is I could build the item on a piece on the bench and sell that piece, and then I'd have a combined item and throw it onto Atrox. Because the problem is, if I have a Negatron cloak on Atrox already and I want to build like something out of 2 recurve bows, when I put a recurve bow onto the piece, it will combine into an item. So that's a nice trick to know. And with that, I think we've covered all the beginner stuff for the game, really. So at this point, you're already probably ready to jump into games and start playing. There's a lot of stuff to read and keep track of. It's going to be very hard to feel like you have enough time to make all the decisions in your first time through the game, because this is all on a timer, and there's no way to like play a game mode with a longer timer between rounds, unfortunately. So it'll definitely be a bit of a scramble as you're trying to do stuff pretty quick. But beginners of the game, that's what I had for you. So for an enthusiast of the game, we start thinking a little bit more about how to leverage these mechanics and how to get stronger and stronger stuff going on for ourselves. You can see that I'm scouting other boards right now. And so one thing that goes on in this game is that the pieces that you get come from a shared pool. This Nidalee card here, there are 39 total Nidalees in the pool of pieces for the game. There are 26 of each 2 cost, 39 of each 1 cost, 26 of each 2 cost, 21 of each 3 cost, 13 of each 4 cost, and only 10 of each 5 cost. A big thing is that if you get 3 of the same piece, they will combine into a higher level piece. So you can see that I have 3 Tristanas who have combined into a silver Tristana, or I'm going to say 2-star Tristana. So I would say Tristana is a 1-cost 2-star piece right now. Now, that makes Tristana significantly stronger. I would say somewhere in the vicinity of twice as strong. A problem with this game is that if I'm trying to get a 3-star Tristana, which requires that I get 9 Tristanas, and there are 3 other people trying to do that as well, all of a sudden there start to not be enough cards for us to reasonably find those Tristanas. And so every time I roll, if I'm like level 5, I have a certain % chance that each card I see will be 1 cost. And then if I do successfully get a 1-cost card, I have to also get lucky and have it be Tristana when there are only 20 Tristanas left, maybe, and there are still 36 of some of the other 1-cost cards. So it's really hard to get Tristana at that point. And so as you get more into this game, something that you can be thinking about is looking at what other people are doing and trying to find something in the lobby that not so many other people really care about, so that you're not competing with pieces for them. Going for a 3-star Tristana might be really good if nobody else in the lobby is going for a 3-star Tristana, but it might be very bad if 3 other people are going for it. Another thing to think about for more enthusiast play of the game is understanding building a composition that really like fits together and makes sense. So I would say that one of the big things in just like MOBAs in general, League of Legends is a MOBA, a mass online battle arena, I think is what that stands for. And basically you make a team in League of Legends and fight another team. And there are basically frontline pieces and backline pieces in MOBAs, sort of basically. You build pieces which are really, really good at dealing damage, and then you try to defend those pieces with pieces which are really hard to kill. The pieces which are really hard to kill might also be pieces which crowd control the enemy units, so they're like stunning them and what have you. Working out as you go through a game, instead of just combining items willy-nilly, working out how you can use the items and the composition synergies to make a front line which is difficult to kill and a back line which is very good at dealing damage is something that will make it so that you win a lot more of your games. You don't necessarily have to build an item as soon as you have the ability to build an item. You can hold on to uncompleted pieces and sort of stay open and put your feelers out and be like, maybe I can get a 3-star Tristana, maybe I could get a 2-star Draven later. Draven's a 4-cost piece, which is very good. Maybe I could build damage out of like a Morgana or a Katarina. And as you play more of the game, you'll learn that these different pieces deal damage very well, and they deal damage very well with different items. Katarina is a piece, when she ultimates, she does a spinny thing and kills everything. But ultimating requires that you build up all of the mana in your mana bar before it happens. And Katarina has quite a lot of mana in her mana bar, and you generate mana by receiving damage or by auto-attacking. But she doesn't auto-attack particularly fast, and she's melee range with her auto-attack, and she doesn't have a large enough health pool to get all of her mana by being attacked. And so if you want to carry with Katarina, you're going to want to put some items on her that give her more stunning mana so that her ultimate goes off. On the other hand, Draven, who's also an Imperial, Katarina and Draven are both Imperial pieces, so they sort of match together synergetically that way. Draven does not need mana at all. He needs completely different items. He wants like attack speed, attack damage, and maybe some like magic resist or armor. So depending on which items you have, you're going to want to identify what sort of thing can I do to deal damage, and also what sort of thing can I do to tank damage to survive long enough for my damage dealer to actually kill the enemy team. I think the third thing I want to say to an enthusiast player is you want to think about not just doing like the same thing every time, but really adapting to what's going on. And one thing that you start to think about a lot is how to manage your economy. In this game, you can get extra gold for having gold in the bank. So right now I have 40 gold in this game. That means that I get 4 extra gold in interest every single round. Right now, at the end of this round, I'm going to get 5 gold in passive income and 4 gold out of interest. So that interest is actually massive. Also in this round, I'm getting, well, I'm going to lose, so no, I'm not. But if I had won, I would have gotten an additional 1 gold. The winner gets 1 gold each round, and I would have gotten a streak bonus. You get extra gold as you go on a longer and longer win streak or a longer and longer lose streak. So something that happens in Teamfight Tactics, because of how that works economically, is that if you're weak, you're likely to sort of go on a bit of a loss streak, get a bit of gold, and then because you're weak and because you have a decent amount of gold and because you have weak pieces, you're going to be able to start rolling. And by that I mean refreshing the cards that you have. So you use that loss streak and you'll use that interest to gain a bunch of gold. And you're going to lose a lot of health right now in this game. I have 96 health, so if I started loss streaking, it would take a while before I was really in danger of dying. So we're sort of using our health as a resource in order to use this interest mechanic to get a big bank of gold. And from there, you'll reach a point where maybe the cue is that we hit level 7 or hit level 6, maybe something like that. As we level up, our chance of seeing higher cost pieces increases. And you'll be sitting maybe with 50 or 60 gold at level 6 or 7, and it'll be like, all right, now's the time that I want to stop losing. And really, really quickly, you'll start hitting refresh a bunch and looking for the pieces that you identify that you need for whatever reason. Maybe you already have half of a comp that you want and are looking for the other comp, or maybe you have particular items that are really good on certain pieces, and so you're looking for those pieces. It's obviously very, very, very complicated exactly how to work out which pieces you want in a lobby, but a lot of trial and error, I think, is the first thing to start to learn. And then you'll get to a point where you have maybe only 20 gold left or 10 gold left or even 0 gold left, and so you're not getting interest anymore, but you are winning. And so you're not using your health as a resource anymore, you're not losing health anymore, and you're starting to build your economy back again because you don't have to spend money now because you're strong now, and because you start to get a win streak bonus and you start getting that 1 gold per round for wins. So understanding how that economy sort of ebbs and flows in games, I think, is a pretty important thing to be able to do. All right, cool. For an advanced player, I want to talk about thinking more about the entire lobby and what's happening that your opponents are doing, as well as just thinking about what's happening that you are doing. I talked a little bit to enthusiasts about the idea of not trying to build the exact same thing as your opponents are building because you compete for pieces. And that was sort of an important thing to bring up because we were talking about the actual mechanics of the game. But another reason to care about not building exactly what your opponents are doing is that if your opponents are doing a certain thing, you could do something that counters it instead of like trying to do the same thing as them. In fact, doing the same thing as multiple opponents may be actively bad because anybody who counters your opponents will also counter you. If 4 people in the lobby do exactly the same thing, then it will be relatively easy for one other player to build an item or a composition that counters that thing, and all of a sudden, there are 4 players. Pairings are random each round, but if there are 4 players doing something, then building an item that counters that thing gives you a pretty good chance of getting a lot of solid wins with your composition, right? So taking a look at what other people are doing with their teams gives you the ability to decide what you want to do and position yourself in a place where you're countering the things other people do, or at least you're not weak to them, and you're not competing for other pieces with them as much as possible, and all those sorts of things. Another way that you can counter what other people are doing is you can scout the lobby. So you see every now and then I'm using the R key. R is a default hotkey to scroll through other people's boards. I'm using that to look at what their teams are. And there are lots of reasons for doing that. One reason is I might be on a win streak, and I want to see if it's likely that I'll continue my win streak. So I'll check all the other team comps and be like, okay, I beat this, I beat this, I beat this, I beat this. As you get more and more experience with the game, you start being able to recognize which comps are going to be really tough for you to beat and which are pretty easy. And if I see that I beat every comp easily except for one, all of a sudden I can think like, okay, my Tristana is my ranged damage dealer. I want her to stay alive. So I'm going to position her in a place on my board where that one comp that I'm worried about won't do a very good job of killing her. Understanding how the different units move around, the fact that assassin-type units jump to the furthest visible enemy at the starts of fights, the fact that Blitzcrank will hook the furthest visible enemy at the start of a fight. It's a very big deal if you're playing against Blitzcrank. Stuff like this can really count for a lot over the course of a game. The difference between having a 9 win streak and having 4 wins, a loss, and then 4 wins again is a significant amount of gold. And so keeping an eye on that is, I would say, a pretty big deal. Another part of understanding what's going on in the lobby is understanding how much pressure you're under economically. If the lobby is very aggressive, if lots and lots of people have dropped to 40 health, if 2 or 3 people got pretty lucky early game and were able to put together a very strong early game composition, these things could mean that you're in much more danger of taking a lot of damage. And that could influence your decisions about like, how quickly am I going to start rerolling to try to hit my comp and stuff like that. Right now I'm sitting here at 96 health. And naively, I could say I'm on 96 health. That means I'm very safe right now. I don't have to worry about using my economy yet. But there's more to it to that. It's more complicated than that. If I see in the top left here maybe that a lot of people have just hit a ton of upgrades on their units, or if I scout the board and see that a ton of people just spent 50 gold on their compositions, then sure, I have 96 health and I won't die in one round, but all of a sudden I might be in a position where I'm like expecting to take 20 damage a round or something, and that will kill me pretty quickly. And so keeping track of what's going on in the lobby can really influence your decisions on when to be spending your money to reroll versus saving for interest, or even leveling up to try to aim for higher cost units later on in the game. All right, great. For expert players, I want to talk about two pretty complicated concepts that. Okay, I think the first one stays well within Teamfight Tactics, and the second one sort of steps away from it and talks about us as humans and how we play games. So let's tackle the first concept first, and then we'll get into the more complicated one. There's a concept in Magic the Gathering, which is sort of where I'm stealing some of this terminology from, in this case, called a mana curve. And a deck's mana curve describes sort of how difficult it is to cast the spells in it. If a deck's mana curve is very top heavy, it takes a long time before you get enough mana to cast the spells. And a deck that was very top heavy might be a deck that could be called a control deck maybe. It's more focused on later on in the game. A deck that has a very low mana curve could be a deck that was very aggressive. So it was focused more around 1 and 2 cost cards in Magic the Gathering, and it was trying to, kill its opponent as quickly as possible before that control deck with higher cost cards could really control things. There's definitely a cost curve in Teamfight Tactics as well to different competitions. If you're going for a gunslinger composition on this patch, for example, Tristana, Graves, and Lucian are 1 or 2 cost units. And so that feels a lot like playing a very aggressive composition. And when you have a low cost curve like that, leveling up is not going to be as large a priority. Also, like econing up, getting a ton of interest is not going to be as large a priority. What's more of a priority is early in the game, when you have a high chance of seeing 1 and 2 cost units, doing some rerolls and trying to get a 3-star of it. And I'm not saying that you should go all in on gunslingers all the time or anything like that, but recognizing a situation where you, for example, have 5 copies of Tristana and 5 copies of Graves early on in the game, and you're about to level up, and thinking, oh, instead of leveling up and just going for interest here, I could reroll to take advantage of this these 5 Tristanas and 5 Graves that get me pretty close to having a 3-star of each of those. Is like looking for that cue lets you not only understand how to build a comp, but also how to manage your economy to try to build that comp correctly. And depending on what other players are doing in the lobby, you might be more or less incentivized to manage your economy that way to go for that comp. In this patch right now, we're on 9.14. It's July the 19th. The gunslingers and the ninjas and assassins are the lowest cost compositions. So gunslingers are centered around 1 or 2. Ninjas and assassins are centered in the 2 to 3 range. Gunslingers can come on a little earlier than the ninja assassins. Ninja assassins have to wait for a Kali in particular, which is a 4-cost piece. So they get a lot of strength from 2 and 3s, but then they're waiting for a 4 as well. Those two comps have very different cost curves. Even though they're similar, they're both low cost curves, they do have very different cost curves. And so one of them is really trying to hit a 4 cost along with some 2-star 2s and 3s. And one of them is trying to hit 3-star 1s and 2s. How you manage your economy is going to be different to try to maximize your chances of doing each of those things. And you should think about how exactly is that different. If you look at things like demons and brawlers, elementalists, sorcerers, yordles, some of these comps are, I think, much stronger in this meta than others. And I say meta, and what I mean by that is like the way that the game is being played right now, in case you've never heard that word before. These are compositions that center in the 2 to 4 cost range. And to build those compositions requires a different sort of approach. One way that you could get into a composition like that is you could hit an early 3 cost that was vital to the composition and sort of build around it to some extent. Like you could get it on the board, you could get the right items onto it, and you could recognize, okay, this composition's centered in the 2 to 4 range, so I don't want to be rolling a ton right yet, but I have a relatively strong team thanks to the existence of this 3 cost on my board. I'm going to econ up a little bit, and then I'm going to roll for the rest of the pieces and get something really, really strong. Another way that you could end up in a comp that had this sort of cost curve is you could start the game with strong pieces that didn't make sense for later in the game. So let's say, for example, that I start the game with a 2-star Pike, a 2-star Nidalee, a 2-star Garen. These are all like pretty good pieces, but they have no synergy at all with each other. And so, sure, I'm going to like play them in the starting rounds because they're 2-star and they have good stats and they do good damage. Maybe I throw a Kennen in later too, another piece that has no synergy with any of them, but is just strong at killing stuff right now. I can take advantage of the fact that I have these strong early game pieces to keep my health healthy without spending a ton of gold in any comp. And from there, later on in the game, I can have a strong enough economy that I can sell those pieces, and I can build an appropriate comp in like the 2 to 4 cost range that can beat the other comps that I'm seeing in the game. In this game, for example, something very much like that happened. What happened in this game was that I got strong early game pieces, which meant that my health stayed very healthy. And then I got a pretty good economy, and I looked around at the lobby, saw that a lot of people were playing auto attack based builds, saw that nobody was playing Yordles, was offered a few Yordles, and I was like, oh, I can play Yordles and win the lobby. So this was an example where this is the only time last night in 20 games or something that I played a Yordle comp, but it was an example of a place where like building Yordles wasn't even a difficult decision to me. It's not like that's something that I go into every game thinking I'm going to do it. This was a situation where sort of the story that I felt I was being told by the cards presented to me, the economy presented to me, the enemy teams presented to me, the items presented to me, made me think, gee, Yordles just really seem like a good fit to build here. And I'll go even one step further. And I'll say there are comps where like the cost center feels like it's in the 3 to 5 range. Comps that even go above these 2 to 4 cost comps. And you're very seldom going to get those comps without having a very, very strong early game that doesn't sensibly transition into a mid game and late game. But if you do, there are comps to be looking out for that do that. Comps centered around pieces like Anivia or Swain or Karthus 2 or something like that. Understanding that, you know, it is possible to play a comp like that and understanding when you might want to do it is a thing to keep in mind. If you're going to be building a very, very high cost comp, you're often going to be looking at what other people in the lobby are doing and very specifically trying to beat what they're doing. So something to keep in mind. It's not like a situation where you go into the game thinking, I'm going to win this with a 2-cost Anivia or a 2-star Anivia. It's more a situation where you just see that a 2-star Anivia with a Morellonomicon happens to beat the other people in the game. You have a strong enough economy to build that and get a little bit of luck as well. Okay, the other expert level thing I'm going to say, I'm running a little bit long, so I'll say this very briefly. As we get good at games, you can play the same comp over and over again and get to a point where you'll never make a mistake building that comp, and you'll do really well with it because you'll be good at building that comp. But another thing you can do is you can try lots of different comps, and yeah, you'll make mistakes building those comps because you won't understand all of the limitations of that specific comp very well. But as you get better and better, you'll get to a point where you're like, oh, I've played Yordles 5 times before now. It's very rare that I want to go for it, but this does seem like a good spot to go for it, and I understand how to do that. And I think it's really important to play a variety of comps. Even if you think that one of them is really strong, if you play a game where you're feeling like you're being directed a certain direction, I think you should play the comp that you're being directed to. All right. And talking to master level Teamfight Tactics players without honestly believing that there is one yet. I think there's still a lot for everybody in the world to improve on, and I've watched some people who are very good at Teamfight Tactics play it, but I think a master level player is going to understand how to perfectly implement all of the things that I have talked about in this video, right? I think it is important in learning the game if you want to be as good as possible at the game to recognize how many things you can do in the game. And to aim to be a master level player, I think there are things that you can do, like you can learn how to reroll to switch from any comp into any other comp and make the decision as you're going in the time allotted you in one round. That's really, really hard to do, but it is possible for humans to do that. There are people who speedrun games, there are people who play speed chess at a very high level. It's not impossible to do that. I think that you need to understand what everyone in the lobby is doing at all times. And that's really hard. In fact, that's something that's easier at a high level than a low level, I think, because the player pool is smaller and the sorts of strategies that people employ are going to be more understood. But understanding what everybody is doing in the entire lobby at all times is going to do a huge amount to influence your decisions and let you make informed and correct decisions as you're playing. Understanding how to position your composition every single round to counter the comps that are most difficult for you to play against is a big deal. There is a lot of stuff in this game that requires attention that you don't have that much of, and working out how to use all of your attention to mechanically do everything perfectly in this game, as well as having enough attention left over to build your comp correctly, manage your economy correctly, all of that stuff, is the challenge of a master level Teamfight Tactics player, I would say. And I think that it's really difficult and also really fun to do. So that was my spiel. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I gave you some stuff to think about no matter what level of player of the game you are. I think Teamfight Tactics is a great game. There is some RNG in it, but something that I haven't had to do at all in this entire video is really talk that much about RNG, because the way that RNG feels in this game is that it gives you a variety of different options. It doesn't usually make it so you win or lose by yourself. What it feels like most of the RNG does in this game is it influences what your path to victory is going to be. And trying to understand which path to victory to follow in a game where certain RNG has happened is very enjoyable. Very fun for me, at least. So, let's watch the last round of this game. I've been Jorbs. I play a lot of Teamfight Tactics these days. Also have all sorts of gaming history as a streamer and professional competitive gamer. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Dolphin Chemist is rating with a party of 460. Bye, everybody.